So in our second video looking at units of measure, we'll be focusing on converting units with particular focus on metric and imperial units. So as mentioned in the previous video, it is really important that you know, one, whether a unit is metric or imperial, two, what the actual unit represents, so either length, mass or weight, or volume or capacity, and their abbreviations. Three is the magnitude compared to other units in its category. So for example, recognizing that a meter is bigger than a millimeter and that a ton is much bigger than a milligram, etc. And the next thing is that what unit is best to use in a given situation. So for example, there it's a case of what unit would you use to measure the distance you travel from home to school? What unit of measure would you weigh, let's say, a grain of rice? What unit of measure would you measure how much water you drink in a day? So it's really important to get an idea of what the actual units represent and also where they're used in real world. Now, when it comes to comparing units to other units, now here what we've got is metric to metric units. Now, it is really important that you learn these conversions. Now, as mentioned in the previous video, the advantage of working with metric units is that going from one unit to another, it's basically increasing it by the power of 10. So for example, to get from millimeters to centimeters, well, there's 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter, 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer, and the same thing applies with grams, kilograms, and then you've got milliliters and liters. So again, I would strongly make a note, and if you need to pause the video, you can do to make a note of these, but these are the units that you are going to need to know off by heart, so I recommend that you learn them like you would spellings in English. So the next thing we move on to is imperial to imperial units. Now this, as I mentioned, is not so widely used, and recognizing what each of these are in terms of the actual numbers is going to be a lot more difficult, simply because they are, I won't say pretty random numbers, but there is no pattern going from one unit to another. So for example, here you've got 12 inches are in a foot, 3 feet are in a yard, 1,760 yards are in a mile, 16 ounces are in a pound, 14 pounds are in stone, and 8 pints are in 1 gallon. So like I said, it's really complicated to recognize these because obviously there is no fixed pattern, and you tend to find that if you are working with imperial units in an exam, then these sort of conversions, these units will be given to you. However, if you are working in a classroom environment or from a textbook, then there will be expectancy of you to research these either in your notes or earlier in your work that you've done in terms of earlier in the chapter of a textbook, let's say. And the last thing that we move on to is imperial to metric. Now again, these are another common question that usually gets asked, and like I said, these sort of ratios will be given to you, but I would still try and remember them because it just speeds up the process and recognizing the method you need to convert one to another, which is basically what we're going to move on to now. Now, when it comes to converting units, one thing to note is that it helps to be good at multiplying and dividing by powers of 10 when converting units when you're not allowed to use a calculator. Now, remember that when you are multiplying by powers of 10, you are moving the decimal point to the right to make the number bigger, and when you're dividing by powers of 10, you're moving the decimal point to the left, making the number smaller. Now, the general rule when you're converting, like I said, because you've got so many things to remember, like I said, one question I always get asked as a maths teacher from students is, so how do I revise? There's so much to revise, it's too overwhelming. Now, one tactic you can do to sort of revise units is basically general practice. It's a case of recognizing and trying being a bit smart and recognizing and noting small patterns that you can do to get from one to the other. Now, as I said, apart from metric units, working with imperial units and any conversions with that will generally be given to you in the exam. So really, it's only the metric conversions that you really need to know off by heart. But the general method of converting is something that you do need to practice. Now, generally speaking, once you've gauged an understanding and become more familiar with the units, then to convert a small unit to a big unit, then what you need to do is kind of divide the numbers from a certain ratio of what we're looking at. And we will look in more detail for this. So here, to get from a small unit to a big unit, you divide. And what this is generally going to do, this will make the digit in front of the unit smaller. So for example, if I looked at, let's say, 120 centimeters, and I wanted to convert that into meters. So here I've got the digit of 120. Now I'm going from a small unit to a big unit. Now when I convert that, then that's going to be 1.2. So you can see how the number has got smaller from 120 to 1.2. So when you're going from a small unit to a big unit, you are dividing and therefore making the number in front smaller. So again, using a bit of common sense, you can go from there. Now in the reverse of that, if you're going from a big unit to a small unit, then what you need to do, you need to multiply. And in this, what you're doing is you are making the digit in front of the unit bigger. And again, so for example, if I was going from 1.5 kilograms and I want to convert that into grams, so here I'm going from a big unit to a small unit, so that would be 1,500 grams. And again, try and think of things that you know. So for example, even if it's dead simple, like for example, I could have picked 1 kilogram to represent 1,000 grams. And again, it's just a case of recognizing that and then trying to get using your common sense to figure out what your final answer should look like. So now let's have a look at the actual converting units. Now, so here what I've got is just a side note of everything that you're going to need to revise. So here we're looking at length. So the top box are basically here are my metric units. Here are my imperial units, and in the bottom box I've got a mixture of imperial to metric and so forth. Now for this, what we need to do is just know what we're actually dividing by. Now the numbers in each of these ratios are really important. So for example, and they kind of help you decide what number you are going to be multiplying and dividing by. So as we said, now again what's important is what you don't want to do is in your initial stage when you're working with these questions, you probably have this in front of you to help decide what it is. But what you've got to remember is that you're not going to be given this as an exam. So you need to try and find ways of making things easier for you. So here we've got millimeters to centimeters. So again, going from small to big. So I'm going to divide going in that direction. And I'm going to divide by 10 because that is the number in the actual conversion. So if I just get rid of all these little blue circles. So you can see here I've got 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter, so I'm going to divide by 10. And likewise, I'm going in the opposite direction, I'm going to multiply by 10. Now note that the numbers are going to be exactly the same, it's just the signs that's going to be different. So here from centimeters to meters, I'm going to divide by 100. So to get from meters to centimeters, I'm going to multiply by 100. Meters to kilometers, I'm going to divide by 1000. So kilometers to meters, I'm going to times by 1000. Then inches to feet. So here I am going to be dividing by 12. And so from feet to inches, I'm going to be multiplying by 12. And again, where I'm getting the 12 from is from this formula here. So to get from feet to yards, I'm going to divide by 3. So to get from yards to feet, I'm going to multiply by 3. Yards to miles. So here I'm going to divide by 1760, and to get from miles to yards, I'm going to multiply by 1760. And then kilometers to miles. Now this one's a little bit tricky. So what I've done is I've converted it to 1 mile. So 1 mile is approximately 1.6 kilometers. Actually, it's 1.609 kilometers. So if you're ever doing the 1600 on sports day or in PE, you basically run a mile. So it's like, I think our school track is like 400 meters. So it would be 4 laps would represent 1 mile. Or if you've got 300 meter track, then obviously it's going to be a little bit more. So kilometers to miles, I'm going from, so a mile is longer than a kilometer. So here I'm going to be dividing by 1.6. So miles to kilometers, I'm going to multiply by 1.6. And again, like I said, these are things that you kind of need to know. But if you learn your ratios in terms of general conversions, then like I said, all you need to know and remember is which one's smaller, which one's bigger. To go from small to big, you divide, big to small, you multiply, and we go from there. So now let's have a look at mass and weight units. So again, we're going to follow the same sort of procedure. So again, the first set of boxes represent our metric units. Our second set of boxes represent our imperial units. And our third box represents a mixture of imperial to metric. So from this, again, it's establishing which one's which. So from milligrams to grams, I'm going to divide by 1,000. So grams to milligrams, I'm going to multiply by 1,000. Grams to kilograms, again, same sort of formula, it's going to be divided by 1,000. And kilograms to grams, I'm going to multiply by 1,000. Kilograms to tons, again, divide by 1,000 and divide by 1,000. Times by 1,000 for tons to kilograms. Then ounces to pounds. So here I'm going to be dividing by 16, and then pounds to ounces, I'm going to times by 16. Pounds to stones, so here we're looking at dividing by 14, and stones to pounds, we're going to multiply by 14. Pounds to kilograms, I'm going to be dividing by 2.2, and kilograms to pounds, I'm going to multiply by 2.2. And then finally, kilograms to stones, I'm going to divide by 6.35, and stones to kilograms, I'm going to multiply by 6.35. Now, if you had a question that wanted you to convert milligrams to, let's say, kilograms, then one way of doing this is to find the intermediate. Now, there is no ratio that I've drawn here that goes from milligrams to kilograms. So what I need to do is add grams in there. So if I had a milligram sort of question to convert to milligrams, then what I need to do is convert it first into grams. So do that by dividing by 1,000. And then I would then divide that by another 1,000 to convert the grams into kilograms, giving me an overall division of with 3 zeros, so it'd be a million divided by a million, and there we can go from there. Now moving on to our last set, which is looking at capacity and volume units. So again, I've got my metric units in my top box, I've got my imperial units in my second box, and I've got a mixture of imperial and metric in my third box. So again, here, milliliters to litres, I'm going to be dividing by 1,000. Litres to milliliters, I'm going to multiply by 1,000. Pints to gallons, so again here I'm going to be dividing by 8, and then here I'm going to be multiplying by 8. Litres to gallons, I'm going to be dividing by 4.5, and gallons to litres, I'm going to be multiplying by 4.5, and milliliters to pints, I'm going to be dividing by 568, and pints to milliliters, I'm going to be multiplying by 568. So again, if you can recognize the boxes, again, trying to learn the flow diagrams or the little diagrams that I'm doing here is going to be really difficult. So just try and understand the general setup and the method of getting one from the other. You'll find your life a lot easier, especially when it comes to revising. So now let's have a look at a few examples that can be found on a non-calculator paper. And so the first question is asking us to convert 56 kilometers into centimeters. Now the first thing we need to look at is this answer is going to be a huge number. So this question is generally going to be, could easily be linked with a couple of topics, which is probably why it might be classed as a high level topic, because it's going to incorporate you multiplying and dividing by powers of 10, which again, if you're not too sure about, there is a video on there, and also may incorporate writing numbers in standard form. Because the numbers are going to be ridiculously big or ridiculously small, then it's something that you probably need to investigate if you've not looked at it already when looking at standard form, or writing numbers in standard form, I should say. So let's have a look at the first question. So the first question is asking us to convert 56 kilometers into centimeters. Now, again, 56 kilometers is a long distance. It's like going from one city to another. So it's almost like the equivalent of, I would say, over an hour's drive in a car. So this is going to be a very, very big number. Now, in terms of kilometers to centimeters, let's have a look at the general breakdown of what we've got. Now, we can convert kilometers into meters and then meters into centimeters. Now, to go from a big unit to a small unit, I need to multiply. Now, I then ask myself, how many meters are there in a kilometer? Well, there's 1,000. And then I then need to ask myself, how many centimeters are there in a meter? There are 100. And again, I'm going from a big unit to a small unit. So again, I am multiplying. So all in all, I'm going to be multiplying 56 by, and if I join these two numbers up, by 1, and then it's going to be 5 zeros. So just add the zeros together, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to be multiplying by 100,000. So here I'm going to do 56 times, again, you could either break it up, so I could either multiply it by 1,000, so that's going to be 56,000, and then I'm going to multiply 56,000 by 100, which then gives me 56, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there would be my final answer. So it would be 5.6 million centimeters. So good luck measuring that with your little ruler that you've got in your pencil case. So again, and likewise, I could have easily have just gone bypass that and just done 56 times by 100,000, and I would have got the same answer. So it's all about moving the decimal point. So the next thing we're moving on to is converting millimeters into kilometers. So here I've got millimeters, then I've got centimeters, then I've got meters, and then I've got kilometers. Now here I'm going from a small unit to a big unit, so here I need to divide. So how many millimeters are there in a centimeter? Well, that's going to be 10. How many centimeters are there in a meter? Well, that's going to be 100. And then how many meters there are in a kilometer? Well, that's going to be 1,000. So if I join all of these zeros up, so I've got 3, 5, and 6, then I'm going to be dividing by 1,000,000. So what I then need to do is do 3.4 divided by 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and working that out. Now, again, when you're dividing by powers of 10, what you're doing is you're moving the decimal point by the number of zeros. So here, when I'm dividing, I'm moving it to the left, so I'm going to end up with a very small number. So I've got 3.4, so moving it 6 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is where the decimal point is going to go, and I fill the empty spaces with zeros. So that will give me a final answer of 0.00000034 kilometers. And again, a very, very small number, in which again, I could easily get asked to write both of these two answers in standard form, which I'm not going to go through now, but if you've watched the video, you'll be able to easily convert it from there. Now, we'll put some notes in the description below, notably all the conversions of the tables and also most of the flow diagrams. There may be a few that I've missed off on the note sheet which you may want to add, but I strongly recommend that you pause the video at the appropriate times and copy down the flow diagrams and then work through the worksheet, which I will attach. And then hopefully once you get a bit of practice and once you know when to multiply and divide, this topic, which may seem very, very difficult, and it's a very common topic that a lot of students tend to question their ability on, with a bit of practice, you'll absolutely be absolute masters at it.